Welcome. Today I'm going to talk about APIBAN and protecting your SIP servers with APIBAN. It's great to be back at ClueCon today and every day. Okay, well, let's go through a quick agenda. I'm going to give a quick introduction. We'll talk about what is APIBAN, how does APIBAN work, how one would integrate APIBAN once you find out what it is and how it works. And then we'll talk about something called iptables-api. So the introduction, my favorite introduction at ClueCon was when I was wearing the same outfit as I had on there. And so I made sure not to replicate that mistake. I am Fred Posner. I'm a voice over IP consultant. I work with Kamailio. Very honored to be part of that project. Usually I wear a Kamailio hat, as you can see there and here. My beautiful wife and daughter. I'm based out of Florida. My favorite way to communicate is on Matrix, Twitter, and never SIP because we're in telephony, right? All right, so what is APIBAN? APIBAN is not fail to ban. And I say that because I really don't like fail to ban. And the reasons why I don't like fail to ban is just based on experience. I think the concept of it is great, and it does have a use. My major problems with fail to ban was high memory usage, high CPU usage. It was reactive, right? So fail to ban is blocking something because you've already been attacked, and then it happens on a single box, right? So those are my major concerns with fail to ban. My minor concerns was that I could never remember the commands, right? So when a user would block themselves out, it would take me forever and a day to unblock them just because I'd have to go look it up, and it was just, someone yelling at you that they're blocked and, because of a legit problem normally, but anyway. And then the other thing is I do like IP tables, and when we had some customs chains, in whatever system we're running and fail to ban was running, sometimes it would like to delete all of our customs chains, and that's not nice. So API ban is not fail to ban, but what it is a simple API to help you identify unwanted, or bad traffic that's coming to your systems. It was an idea we floated around at, conferences such as this, Kamailio World especially. We all were thinking, wow, we're getting so many attacks from just having a SIP server out there on the internet that there's got to be a way for us to maybe tell each other when one of us got hit, something like that, and try to proactively reduce it so that if you hit me, I don't, it doesn't hit you, kind of a sharing of this information. So we would wait a year and meet at the conference again and go, wow, remember we had that great idea, and we never did anything with it. And then back in 2020, I had a couple weeks on my schedule that freed up, and I wanted to learn how to do something with Go. And so I thought about doing an API for it, and we deployed some honeypots, and then we just said, well, let's share it with the world. So it's a free service from LOD.com, and we also have some great sponsors that are helping us with funding some honeypots. Those sponsors include NetSapiens, Jambones, Ivan Yarko, who's been here in the past, the company Clearly IP, and many sponsors on GitHub. So we're grateful. Each one of those basically means more honeypots to get more traffic. The big thing is it's free, as in beer, so you don't have to pay for it. We want you to protect your service. And it's a simple API for you to connect to it. So you can query our data in real time. We have globally deployed honeypots, globally, so AKA all over the world. We look for attacks on SIP servers via TLS, TCP, UDP. We look for SIP traffic. We look for non-SIP traffic coming to SIP ports or what a SIP server might listen on. We're also looking for especially things like DNS, stuff like that, which has been used, in the recent past to help take down servers. And then if anyone connects to our honeypots with something like that, we list them in APIBAN as a bad IP. They stay, quote unquote, active in APIBAN for 7 days, at which point we say they're okay now. And some of them relist within seconds. Okay, so you can be reactivated immediately. There's no permanent ban because they just, we only want the active ones. We're trying to keep your IP tables list as small as possible. So on the API itself, the goal was to keep it simple, thinking that you're either going to connect from like a SIP server using curl or something like that. So like on Kamailio, OpenSIPs, even FreeSWITCH. So trying to use get as a method whenever possible. We'll give you, there's where you can check one by one. So if you just run what we call the check part, you put in check/IP, and it will either return a 200, which means that it's blocked, or a 400. You can also get the entire list, which we give in groups of 250, because again, you're a SIP server most likely. So we really want to try to keep your max while loops under 250 there. So we give you that, and then a control ID for pagination, but we can, there's integration examples on how you would do that. If you were just using the band API, for example, you would just go to APIBAN.org with your API key, band. You'll get an array of IP addresses and a control ID. So if you get a 200, that means that there's IP addresses listed. If you get a 400, that means that there's been no new IP addresses since you've last checked. So you would keep checking on that control ID. It would tell you, wow, there's no new IP addresses since that control ID, and you'll get a 400. And then if there are new ones, you'll get the new IP addresses and a new control ID to query next time. And so you can use the control ID to get the next set. On the check one, there's no win. Some people want a 200 if it's not blocked, and a 400 if it is. Other people wanted it the other way. I chose the other way. So you get a 200 if it's blocked, and you get a 404 if we don't know it. With that being the thing, we don't know this IP, so you get a 404. Made sense to me SIP-wise, but it's open source. It's very easy to sign up for APIBAN. All you have to do is go to APIBAN.org, get a key, and you can start using it right away. And again, it's free. And there's full API documentation on the website, APIBAN.org. But now, how do you integrate it? Okay, so you can do your own API thing, and I know now with the push with SignalWire and FreeSWITCH, there's a lot of web devs in here, so full API, you could do whatever you want. That being said, what if you just want to run it on a server and not make your own API programming or anything like that? Well, we have a client, and we have an open source client that we wrote in Go. Location is up there. And it's also linked to from APIBAN.org. But it's a very quick and easy install. Again, you just need that API key that you can get from APIBAN.org. But this client will automatically add a chain to your IP tables. It will then add IPs, and it will also flush old IPs. So again, the IP address is only active for 7 days. And so after 7 days, the IP gets flushed from your chain, so it tries to keep it small as possible. If people are using IP tables a lot, you'll know that if you have huge chains, it can actually decrease the performance of IP tables, right? And so you want to try to keep it reasonable. That being said, at any given time in APIBAN, we have right around an average of 800 to about 1,500 IPs. But like right now, we're in a huge onslaught of Viper VPN is just attacking SIP servers right now. So sometimes in the past couple of weeks or so, it's gone up to around 2,000 or 3,000 active IPs. And Viper VPN, if you should just block that whole subnet, by the way, it's just, there's over 8,000 IPs that have hit SIP servers. Anyway, I call this kind of the Ronco approach, using the client where you set it and forget it, so you don't have to worry about it in FreeSWITCH. So, on Kamailio and, in OpenSIPs as well, you have the ability to not respond to traffic, right? So I have this IP, I can run that check and then go, all right, well, it's a blocked IP, let me just drop the traffic, not respond. We can't really do that in FreeSWITCH, right? So if I get something and it's blocked by ACL or it's blocked by something else, I'm gonna send a SIP response back. And so by blocking it with this client in iptables, FreeSWITCH won't even see it. The other benefit of using this with iptables is it moves this activity from the software layer down to like layer 2 or 3, right? And so even with Kamailio, where I was, sending, let's say, 5,000 calls per second of just bad traffic, Kamailio is still going to use some CPU. It's not going to use a ton of CPU because it's Kamailio, right? So it's going to use like maybe, less than 10%. But if I move it to iptables, it's going to go down to less than 1%. So it just makes it incredibly more efficient. This is what iptables is on your system for. It's on a different layer. It works great. Same thing with FreeSWITCH. Although if I hit it with that much traffic, it's going to have a much worse effect. It's going to use a lot more CPU. But if I block in iptables, FreeSWITCH won't ever have to see it, right? It's being blocked on the network. So that's why we like the client, especially for FreeSWITCH, Fusion, Asterisk, things like that. On the site, we have examples of other integrations and very detailed examples of how you can integrate this with Kamailio. There's Homer examples of how you can integrate this with check within Homer, also SIP3. One for doing iptables integration with, let's say, just a bash script if you don't want to run our Go client. There's an OpenSIPs example, and for people out there that are running pfSense and OpenSense, we have an example of integrating it with IPset. So instead of just listing each IPs, we also provide an IPset return so that it can be blocked automatically at your router level if you have a router that supports IPset. The two that I know of that do it are pfSense and OpenSense. But there's more. We also made something called iptables-api. And this I really like. It's a very, very simple API. And again, it was my biggest problem with fail2ban was not remembering how to unblock an IP, right? The blocking's automatic, but I just couldn't remember how to unblock it if I needed it. So iptables-api is a very simple API. It makes a local chain in your iptables, and then you can use it to block IPv4 and IPv6. It's simple if you want. It does support, there's a lot more documentation on the website for it, but it supports post if you wanted to, or push and delete for real web devs. But if you're just someone that just wants to run a quick get command, you could block IP and you can run unblock IP, and I can remember those, so that's why they're there. You can flush the entire chain just by running flush chain, and you can use it directly from FreeSWITCH. So where APIBAN really excels is it's using our honeypot data, and it's trying to prevent anyone from hitting you that we know of. So proactively, instead of waiting for you to get hit and then blocking them, let's block them before they hit you. But that being said, APIBAN isn't going to protect you from a direct attack. Somebody knows you, somebody doesn't like you, some user has gone AWOL or compromised or is just harassing you, and you want to block them. You can easily do that from the dial plan within FreeSWITCH or Lewis script or anything. Just, you know, hey, I had this many attempts, block it, things like that. So you can help protect your own system, you know, from a direct attack there or something that just doesn't meet your criteria. The nice thing about this is you can also set the chain. So right now it's, let's say for example, we've been talking about doing rejects, but you can use this iptables-api to lock out the world by default on your iptables, and then use this to unblock or allow certain IPs, right? So you could say, okay, by default, I'm gonna be preventing anyone unknown from hitting me, and instead of a very complicated ACL, I'll just run a curl statement whenever we get a new client IP or something like that, and then unblock them and allow their traffic. And that, I've tried to leave some room for questions. And again, we would hope that you would go to apiban.org. The key is free, and you know, please help protect your systems. Thank you so much.
So my understanding is the block list is generated by a certain set of honeypots that are set up just for gathering these bad addresses, right?
Yeah, there's honeypots all over the world.
Okay. If a user of APIBAN encounters a bad address, does it have the ability to report that to APIBAN, or is that not something that's capable of doing?
Right now it doesn't. And all right, so the question was, I mean, he's very well mic'd and I could hear him great. So thank you. The question was, can basically users submit to APIBAN? You know, I found one in the wild that's attacking me. I want to help the world, and can I share this API or share this IP address? Right now the answer is no. And we thought very long and hard about it. We had discussions on it. There's a public matrix room for APIBAN, so we even talked about it as a community. The answer is no for now because of the current state of ethics among carriers and things like that, where we are very afraid of poison data. And so the local IP tables API would really help you in that case, right? So you could block it on your own and things like that. So yes, you couldn't share it with the world, but at the same point, the belief on APIBAN is if there is one legitimate address in there, then it's not worth it, right? You have to trust this data. The data has to be just without compromise. And so that's what we're focused on, is just the integrity of the data. And so because of that, we don't do any community sharing. We don't allow people to provide direct honeypots because, you know, we can't trust that it's secret enough. We change our honeypots all the time so that they're changed, they're used differently. But the idea is that it would be better to have a bad IP get through than to block one legitimate IP. There's another question. Oh, you already have a mic.
Thanks for presentation, Fred. I'm curious about this integrity of the data. With UDP being pretty easily spoofable, is it like, how do you protect from somebody just spoofing your honeypot with, like, I don't know, Verizon IPs or something, something of that nature? So directly attacking IP to ban through the honeypots, essentially.
Right. So we do have monitoring. So how do we protect the data and, you know, someone just attacking it or spoofing it or things like that. So we do some anti-spoofing within the honeypot collection. But that being said, we try to cycle honeypots as well. Right now, the only legitimate IP that's ever been an API ban was mine because I forgot that I didn't change something during a test and I blocked my own IP by hitting a honeypot. Which made it fun for my clients that were using API ban to connect to them. But we do it by changing honeypots by not really publicly allowing honeypots to be used, you know, so people can't really submit or share. By monitoring with logs and things like that. There was a thought of doing multiple detection, you know, where we have to have at least 2 honeypots hit before we listed one. We have the code in there to allow that, but right now it hasn't been necessary, and where there is a value of, because of the global deployment of it just being you hit a single honeypot, let's get it there before, you know, other people are attacked before it hits the second honeypot. But the way we're addressing that is just by constant monitoring. That's a great question, thank you. We have another question over here, and one over there.
So did you consider like having an ISO or something? Like we have a /24 that we can hit all the time, and they start at the base IP, and they go all the way up to the last IP. So what we do is we have a box and a low IP, and as soon as we get any packets to there, go back to the router and block anything coming in. Would you release an ISO or something where I would launch an ESXi where I have no control over it? I have no idea if you're using my data or not. But if somebody's hitting my network, you'll see it if I have spare IPs or have spare resources.
We're not accepting any honeypots because of a concern of quality of data. In terms of blocking subnets, in our monitoring, when we notice a subnet in particular, and for the one off the top of my head is Viper VPN, where again we have thousands and thousands of their IPs just being used to attack SIP servers today. They're the #1 right now. There's over 1,000 active right now. So we recommend blocking that entire subnet. We're still thinking it through on, you know, what's the criteria? If you have on a slash, you know, what percentage of your subnet do we need to have active before we say, hey, let's block this entire subnet? And so because of that, and because of the desire to make sure that we're not blocking any legitimate traffic, we're erring on the side of just doing it one. But we are collecting and analyzing the subnets of each IP that is registered to in any of the NICs, and that will probably be published for you to make your own decisions. That's another good question. I think there was...
Yeah, you mentioned that we cannot submit the IP address so that it's not added to the global database for the right reasons. But is it possible to maintain our own data in the API ban so that all the servers that we have in our infrastructure can have the common database of blocked IPs? Yeah,
I mean, can you take the API ban data and share it among yourselves? Yeah, I mean, we don't have any licensing that says not to do that.
No, we submit the new IPs, but they remain in our exclusive space only. So it's not globally banned, but for us it's black for no matter whichever servers we are using the service on.
We had thought about doing a community share model, and we have decided against that at this time, so we just simply do not allow anyone in the community to submit on IP.
No, not for community, just for our own selves, ourselves only. Well, so we can we have an exclusive store for ourselves on the API server database, API ban server?
Not through API ban,
okay.
But yeah,
so
you could do the same thing, yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
fine.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, but we don't have like a self-hosted version.
All right. So now you guys said you're not allowing the community to set up honeypots, but are you looking for hardware to set up honeypots, or?
Right now because we have a lot of, and I'm pretty much out of time, but, so this will be the last question, sorry. Because we have, because we change IPs a lot and everything like that, the hardware probably wouldn't help us because we'd have to change the IP so much. The best way, and with the pricing that we can get on deploying some of these honeypots and the small footprint we need is just, you know, like even a $5 GitHub sponsorship a month will do a honeypot, literally. So that's the best way we could ask for the community support. It's better than submitting data, because again, we're just really concerned on the compromise. You know, because it could be that you have a bad legitimate user, right? And then you've blocked them, and now, you know, it's a bad, we would consider that bad data. But thank you. Thank you all very much.